All right, welcome everybody to another YouTube Live success story. Really excited to be here with Zoya to share a success story. I think we actually had a little mistake in the title. That'll be changed, but it's actually 770 in 3 months. So I think you're really going to learn a lot from Zoya's success story, mindset, process, how she used the course, practice tests, and so let's see, a couple announcements. First off, I'm Ben Resnick. I'm a TTP live teach instructor, full-time GMAT specialist since 2016. And let's see, in terms of during the call, just feel free to ask questions. We want to make this as fun and engaging as possible. And of course, liking, subscribing, and comments would be great. One question for you to actually, not just for our benefit, but for yours, is to really think about what are your top takeaways from this call and put those into the comments after. Since I started doing this and everything I do, and in terms of reading, and consuming content, it really does make a big difference in terms of taking the most out of it. So yeah, let's get started. So first off, Zoya, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a quick summary of your story and your background and what got you into the GMAT.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Zoya. I'm originally from Pakistan. I've completed my bachelor's at UC Berkeley, and then I worked in San Francisco for 2 years before I took my GMAT. The reason I decided to take it now was primarily because I was leaving my previous job and I was in between jobs, and I thought it would be a good time to really dedicate myself full-time to the GMAT. I know some people do it concurrently with work, but I had a really good opportunity to kind of just focus on it on its own. And I recently just started working again. And so it was a perfect little vacation, I guess you could call it. But yeah, I took 3 months. I dedicated myself using TTP, and I was able to get, a score that was actually above my target score when I had initially started planning.
Awesome, that's great. And how did you find TTP in the first place? And what was your starting point? And yeah, tell us a little bit about getting the start of the journey.
Sure. So I heard about TTP through a friend, and as most of us would do, I did a little bit of research myself. So I actually went on GMAT Club, read a couple of reviews, and I had a lot of different options that I was debating between. One of the things that I kind of used to narrow down my options was affordability, and so I know there's some courses out there that are like outrageously expensive. So TTP was one that was, economically made a lot of sense and perfectly had the best reviews as well. And so I decided to give it a shot, initially just using their 1-day free trial for 5 days. And as soon as I did that, I knew it was like the right course for me. One of the things that really instantly got me was the calendar and the organization. And as like a very type A person, it was very much suited to my personality. So I think it worked really well for me in that way. I think even if you're not someone who is necessarily very organized, if anything, that can help to keep you in check a little bit more. But also, it is flexible. So there were days where I wasn't fully kind of on track with the plan, or I would go faster than, even though it would tell me not to skip to the next day, I would sometimes do it. And so it is flexible, and it does kind of adjust as you go along. So I think that really attracted me to it because it's organized, it's structured, it creates your study plan for you, but at the same time, you do have the flexibility to, have a life and do other things and move things around.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. And then, yeah, we hear that feedback a lot in terms of the structure. And I'd be curious too, how you structured your day in terms of, how much time you put in and how you like to align it. Because a lot of times people, it sounds like having that little bit of gap definitely helped a lot. There can be a lot of material. And so one of the challenges, is keeping the discipline, the energy high. It can be tiring. So, and there is some strategy around for what time of the day and things. So how did you handle it?
Yeah, so I'm a morning person, so I would wake up fairly early, and I would actually start my day by like doing some sort of workout, so either Pilates or going to the gym or whatever that was. I'd come home, I'd eat breakfast, and then from pretty much right after breakfast till just about dinner time, I would study. And so that ended up being around 6 to 7 hours total. And then, of course, I would take some breaks. So I would usually like take a 20-minute break for lunch. But I was fairly like intense and dedicated about it. And I studied throughout the weekends as well. And so the one thing is like, I think it depends on the kind of individual that you are. But for me, I had set a target that I want to take it in 3 months. And although I hadn't signed up for the actual GMAT date, because I know you can do it up until 24 hours before or the week before, depending on the type of GMAT that you're taking, whether it's online or at the test center. But for me, like I still had that 3 month target in my mind. And so I was very much like looking towards that goal. I think it can help, especially if you're not doing it full time and you're doing it just after work, to really have, or before work, depending on kind of what your schedule is. It can really help to have a fixed date, like a line in the sand, just so you know what you're working towards. And I think that would help most people just like keep disciplined.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in general, right. It can vary a lot on timelines, so you don't necessarily have to be, a 3 month story, but it's really inspiring to all of us and really great. And I think that's right. That intense approach can work really well. We've also had some success stories where people were working, a ton of hours and they spread it out more and giving them some flexibility. So I think finding the approach that works for you is really what makes a lot of sense. I think that's great. The type A and getting it done and hammering it out and being intense. I would also say, just have some compassion with yourself if it is a little bit more, up and down, right? Or you are working a ton of hours, right? You hear sometimes stories like, oh, I'm working 12-hour days. This is so hard. So you may have to spread it out a bit more, and get that time in right where you can. Another tip I'll say for people is, just get those little bits of time in too, is like in between. So like with that in mind, I often encourage people doing flashcards. Did you incorporate that at all, or any of the other additional features? I think you said custom tests, but talk a little bit about, in addition to just the basic study plan, any other things that you used?
So I did take flashcards and notes using like just handwritten ones, just because I think that helps me process a little better. And then I went through like 10 notebooks that I still have sitting in my room that need to be recycled. And so yeah, a lot of handwritten work. I did use the custom test feature, which I think you mentioned, Ben. And actually, I wish I had leveraged that earlier on in my prep, because when I actually ended up using it was in between my first and second attempt. And so at that point, I felt like honestly I had learned pretty much everything I needed to know, and I felt fairly comfortable with the material. But I hadn't hit my target score, and I really needed just a lot of practice, I felt, of specific topics. And so what I had done during my first attempt was I had actually taken, and sorry, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent
No, no, go ahead.
from
This is
your
good.
specific
This is
question,
good. No, yeah, yeah.
uh, but yeah, so before my first attempt, I took 3 days I pretty much stopped practicing and I was just reviewing my notes and reviewing flashcards. And by the time the GMAT came around, I didn't fully feel as like ready and get go as I had been throughout the TTP course, because it has so many practice questions that your like brain is wired in a certain way and you're constantly practicing. And so I think those 3 days off, if anything, might have hurt me a little bit. So what I did for the second time around, of course, I reviewed my notes, but I made sure to do practice like up until the very last day. And of course, I took it easy on the day right before, but I was doing a lot more practice that time, and I think that really helped, because once you've learned all the concepts, really allowing yourself some time to just do practice questions, whether that's through custom tests or just like specific chapter tests that TTP has, or even the official practice exams, which the course does actually encourage you to do, and it's built into your study plan. Any of those methods, I think, is really good for that, like right the week prior. And so that was kind of the strategy that worked for me. I think TTP also has like lays out everything for you. Like it says the week prior what to do, the day before what to do during the test, how to beat test anxiety. So every single
Right.
topic you can possibly envision, every FAQ you could have is covered,
Right.
which is great, I think, if you're like looking to be thorough. And even if you're not, you can just skip over the stuff that's not relevant, right?
Totally.
So I think I really like the exhaustive nature of the course as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Very thorough and then adaptable as well. I like what you said about the custom tests. I actually took the TTP, helped me get to my 780. And I would do a lot of the custom tests as well with, you can either do topic by topic. I felt like I had the topics down. I would do mixed sets and then really going for streaks. So I'd set it to all hard actually and do like every day before my test. I was like trying to train the mindfulness. You don't necessarily have to do it, but you can do it however you want. And so there's a lot of different stories how that's used. One thing I'll say on that is, as I like what you said about wishing you'd done it a bit sooner, because I do encourage people also to be doing a lot of redos of mistakes. And I think that's a little bit underrated in, just trying to get through the material and not necessarily doing enough, reviewing, reflect. I say this mantra: review, reflect, redo, to really think about what caused the mistake, how to prevent it, and then actually going back and redoing it. Is that something that you incorporated at all? Sounds like you were really diligent in terms of the notebooks and everything. And yeah, actually, maybe you did say something about reviewing.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Ben. I actually did use the error tracker feature as well. And so after every chapter that I did, there's a bunch of tests. And so every like I think every few chapters that I did, I would review all of the mistakes that I had made. So every single question that I had gotten wrong throughout like the past 3 chapters, as an example. And so that was really helpful. And while I was doing that review for the error tracker, if there were ones that really stumped me, or I kind of was like, okay, I'm reading this answer, so I get it, but I know it's still something really challenging for me, I would bookmark it. And then towards the end of my GMAT prep, I went through all of the bookmarked questions that had kind of accumulated throughout the course. And so it's great because you can kind of take it in steps and do that review kind of for everything at once, or you can take it kind of at your own pace as well.
That's awesome. That's really good. Yeah. And then, so you mentioned like in the course that they had the modules on the psychology, the strategy, all that stuff. In terms of mindset and anything, were there any challenges you faced? It sounds like you had a pretty, reasonably, straightforward journey, but maybe there were little ups and downs mentally or anxiety in some way. Was that any, talk about that a little bit in terms of mindset, what helped you?
Yeah. So halfway through my prep, just because like a month and a half in, I actually went for a vacation with my father, and so I took a week off. And initially, what I was trying to do is kind of sneak in, like you're saying, a little bit here and there, but that was just like not the nature of my study plan, and so that was really stressing me out because while I was on this vacation, I was trying to like take an hour out to secretly do TTP. And so a day or two in, I told myself that, that's it. Like just take the week. And when you get back, you'll catch up or you'll take the GMAT a week later, because I luckily had that flexibility as well. And so I think, like you're saying, like giving yourself being not so harsh on yourself and also giving yourself breaks when you do need them. It was fairly straightforward for me because I had that time, but especially for people who are doing this, with full-time jobs and with 12-hour workdays, it's okay to kind of allow yourself to, I think, have that time. But that being said, I think it's also really good to catch up where you can. And so when you do fall behind, maybe taking an extra day on the weekend to kind of make up for it, just so you are holding yourself accountable for your decisions as well. And that, skipping for a week is not going to help you, as an example. And
Right.
so yeah, I think just really finding that right balance. It's much easier said than done, but it's also something that you can kind of take time with and figure out what works best for you.
That's right. That makes a lot of sense. And what I say to people is pick your poison in terms of not poison, but be conscious about what you're sacrificing now for your bigger picture, right? In terms of, I would say, don't sacrifice. Sometimes I see people sacrifice on sleep or on wellness. if you do like no exercise, that's probably not a good thing for your brain. Like no sleep, that's not good for your brain. So, but you may need to sacrifice on huge trips or a lot of social activities or being out late, right? So generally I encourage, definitely finding that right balance, finding the right amount of like flexibility. But there's also this mantra: if you erase, you must replace. So that I like that what you were saying of kind of like trying to catch up as much as you can. Also having a little bit of flexibility if you needed to push it a week, and giving yourself time, that can help too. But I think that accountability is like kind of the core value, but then also there's a little bit, flexibility as needed, and really making it as needed instead of excuses, tends to be the high achieving approach. So that's awesome. And then what about in terms of any anxiety in terms of
Yeah, Ben.
oh, sorry, did that come through okay?
Sorry, I was just gonna say to your
Oh yeah, go
just
ahead.
to
Yeah.
your point about
Yeah.
about like sleep and exercise. I think that would be like my number one tip to anyone is giving yourself that more than anything else. I haven't like looked into this very deeply, but I think most of us have probably seen here and there just things that are always talking about how you won't end up processing the information you learn if you're not sleeping. But I definitely did that. Like I would give up social engagements, but I would not give up my 8 hours a night.
That's
And
perfect.
so I think the other thing I realized is when I was studying a little later into the night, up until right before I went to sleep, I wouldn't end up sleeping as well, just because I think there was so much on my mind. And when you're studying, your brain is so active. So I think if you are someone that's studying after work, like still give yourself that 30 minutes, 1 hour of downtime, just so you can kind of go into a more calmer state. But even if you're giving yourself 8 hours of sleep, like it would take me much longer to fall asleep in those nights. And so I just started to like push everything a little bit earlier as much as I could. But yeah, cannot stress like the importance of stress, of like stress reduction, sleep, and exercise.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I'm glad you said that. And yeah, the wind down ritual is important too. So, people talk a lot about morning routines, maybe a little bit less about evening routines, right? So on podcasts and everything, right, the morning routines become a whole thing. The evening routine, right, is underrated. And so what you said about winding down, really good. One thing that I like to do personally and also recommend is a little bit of like light reading before bed. And then you're getting like, reading practice helps a bit on the test as well. Fiction can be good to kind of get in that dreamlike state. Even I notice even 15 minutes, I mean, probably more like that half hour is of some sort of wind down ritual, including your other things you need to be doing. Very, very good tip. Cool. And then any other, let's see. I was going to ask any other like anxiety that you had, or have you generally been pretty good on that sort? I mean, most people tend to have some sort of things like unhelpful thoughts, that creep in. But I mean, it sounds like your mindset's pretty good overall. But were there any like things on that in terms of self-talk or mantras, getting yourself into an ideal state, for the day of, or just even, practice tests? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple. So firstly, when I first started doing the TTP course, every time I would do a hard test, so there's tests at the end of every chapter, and so and it gives you a target score. So for the easy test, your score target is I think 90%. For the medium, it's like 70. For the hard, it's 60, or it adjusts I think as well. But anyway, when I was doing the hard ones, and or even if I was doing the medium ones, if I ever got a score below that target score, I would be really hard on myself. And I was like, that's it. Like, I'm going to just do terrible on the GMAT. All this work for nothing. It's just very like poor self-talk. And so I think that was probably my first few weeks. And then I realized that there would be some tests where I would do really badly. And then the next test I would do great. And so I think it's not that one single test can reflect your mastery of the material or how well you've understood that topic. Some questions will be harder for you than others, and some tests will randomly have those. And yeah, the GMAT can do that as well, right? And so I think allowing yourself and knowing that just because you're messing up a little bit, that's the whole point of doing the practice. Um, the second thing is because I was taking the GMAT online, I did 5 practice exams. And so there's 6 official practice exams. The first one I had used as a diagnostic, but I did the other 5 before I took the official GMAT, and I did them all in like, and the TTP course recommends this, but I did them all in the same setting. So I was sitting on my desk. Uh, in the first few I didn't, but in the last 2 I used the whiteboard and the marker and all of that. So really tried to kind of mimic that test environment. I think that was really helpful for managing that anxiety, because then when test day came, it was just like another one of those 5 tests that I had already done. Um, the third thing is that I think the thing that gave me the most anxiety was um, knowing that the day of the GMAT, I could end up with any sorts of question. And so, because it's a computer adaptive test, I kept going through this kind of mental spiral of, oh, what if I do really poorly in the beginning? And then I'm just going to get easy questions and my score will be terrible. Or what if I do really well and then I just keep getting hard questions? And I don't know exactly how the algorithm works. It's not something I think any of us have perfectly figured out. And so, just not going down that spiral, especially not during your exam. But
Right.
I think the only thing that we as students can do to control for that is just try to know every topic as well as you can, right? Because you don't know what's going to end up. You don't know whether you'll get easier questions, harder questions. And so just I think not stressing about the nature of the exam and just kind of trying to understand and master the material as best as you can um, is all we can really do.
Totally, totally. That's great. Yeah. So a few things I want to highlight there. Definitely encourage everyone to do what you did that last few tests, maybe even earlier on, is getting used to that whiteboard and everything. That's awesome, and you do want it to feel like just another thing. In fact, like one of my favorite peak performance psychology, or he calls it high performance psychology, not peak, but they talk about like feeling like training themselves so that like the Super Bowl feels like just another game, like another practice. Like the intensity level is the same height in practice as it is during the Super Bowl. And it just like, there's all this extra attention, but it's maybe has higher stakes, but it feels the same. And so that's really great. And that's totally consistent with, peak, high performance. And let's see, there was a thing that you said at the end. Trying to I'm blanking for a second, but in terms of
The
the
adaptive nature of the
adaptive
test.
nature, right? Adaptive nature. Yeah, people overthink that, right? And you really don't want to do that. You want to focus on the play, and the score takes care of itself, as the other mantra. So a lot of times people think, oh, it's an easy question. It must have I must have missed the one before. It really doesn't. But the algorithm, we actually do know that it doesn't really work that way. It's just kind of like an average. On average, it gets harder, but the individual question, like the difficulty does go way up, way down. There was someone posted on Reddit, like a case study where another thing too is you really can miss a lot and still score a 49 as you did. So we have seen a case study on an actual test, like 70% correct on the quant and scoring 49. So 9 mistakes out of 28. And also on like the practice tests, actually missing like 11 of the 12 hardest questions, but getting all the rest right and not scoring a 49. So just keeping in mind that like you don't really have to be perfect, and it helps a lot. And I do often see that super common is like that stress of like the hard versus easy one and overthinking it really, but it's only gonna take away your attention from the one problem. And then your big picture comment, totally love that in terms of focus on the content and the rest takes care of itself. Like if you really have that mastery, sure, you might get a few that stump you. I've done this 8 years, and maybe I'll get like 1 or 2 that are like, whoa, that's tripping me up. But just, if you feel your heart rate racing off, right, a couple deep breaths, right, and everything. Is that something you have any practice with breathing exercises or anything? It's okay if you don't, but just curious. If there were any things like, did you ever feel
Uh,
like you're a little tension and then finding a way to relax? Yeah.
so when I first started uh, preparing for the GMAT, I had told myself I was going to start meditating twice a day. to really get like in the right mindset. I didn't end up doing that probably until the week before my test. So wasn't doing a ton of mindfulness, but like I said, like I was focusing on sleep, eating really healthy, like working out. So I had a lot of that like wellness stuff. I feel kind of balanced. I would take like some time in the evening, spend time with my family, or when I'd watch dinner, I would play like I'd watch Friends just because it's really mindless and wouldn't take a lot of energy. But uh, the week slash 2 weeks, I think, leading up to the test, I did do like some meditations. I would always fall asleep to a meditation. And I think that did really help me kind of get into the right headspace. I didn't necessarily do any like breathing exercises before the test or anything like that. I usually get like the test adrenaline, but I don't necessarily have, I think, like crazy test anxiety or anything like that. So it was helpful. I think some adrenaline is good for you when you're taking a
Totally.
test. And
Yeah, yeah.
so as long as you're kind of channeling it correctly, I had a huge debate about whether or not like I should drink caffeine before the exam, because I wasn't normally having coffee or tea. But I thought maybe like it would help me kind of be more focused, this, that. But I again, I just kind of read the TTP article on that, and it said to pretty much stick to what you have been doing. And so I didn't end up having any caffeine. And again, the test jitters are always there anyways, regardless of whether or not you have any coffee in your body. So
Right.
I think just like channeling those. The other thing is also using your breaks uh, kind of wisely, and again, trying to have like as much positive self-talk as you can during your breaks. Um, don't like stress about how you did in the section that's already over. Just look towards what's coming next. I didn't necessarily take that advice. So funnily enough, as you're saying, Ben, you know, sometimes the questions are hard or easy and you don't really know. And so when I did the second time around, when I got done with my quant and verbal, and I only had the integrated reasoning and the AMA or AWA left, I was sitting during my break and I was like, this is so embarrassing. Why did I try a second time? I totally did worse than the first time, like really messed up. And I was like, what a waste of like my money and my energy. Not great self-talk. But luckily I was pretty much done the hard parts by then. I mean, I was very much surprised when I saw the result, right? So I think again, you can't predict at all what this test is gonna do. And also just I think one of my mantras usually, I mean, in general, and also while I was preparing, is all you can do is your best. And so not beating yourself up by looking at what other people are doing or when you're getting questions right or wrong, but it's like really all you can do is your best. And so as long as you're giving it your version of that, um, then that's enough.
That's right. That's great. Yeah, that was positive mantra. So just to see for everyone, like even the highest performers on tests, like pretty much everyone, it's pretty normal to have these unhelpful thoughts creep in, but it's about how we handle them in terms of like having that helpful mantra. All you can do is your best. I love that. And then yeah, really common with the breaks. Then on the good news, it sounds like with that is we were already done with those two sections. I think it's really tragic when I hear the story that like they scored super high on a section, thought, got some hard problems, right? Thought they did bad. And then they kind of like gave up on the second section, right? When they did great on the first section, but they kind of like, that's where it's really sad, right? Where, so that's a good lesson for everyone. Definitely don't give up. You can't judge how you're doing. And it's really common that people do well, but it feels hard, right? Because that's just, the adaptive nature. Or even the other way around. You could have the other thing. It felt easy and that and you're like, you think, oh, I missed some early on, but that's not necessarily true either, at all. Like, so, yeah, great advice to not be judging yourself as you go. I mean, same thing in any sport too. That's another tip I give people is if you are active in sports, try and channel those same strategies that you're using at high performance in another thing. So sometimes people, maybe they, were better at athletics historically or more confident and maybe less confident in like a standardized test setting. So, if you can channel that like strongest self, that most confident self into and just the habits and mindfulness and focus into that, and vice versa. Like as you go through your life, you know, say for me, I'm playing my sports and doing things, I try to channel my GMAT mindset and vice versa. One other thing about channeling that I liked is what you said about the jitters. The adrenaline can actually be good for you. That's totally the right mindset. There's actually been 2 studies in the last 10 years, I think, that there's actually on the blog. There's a great article, Get Excited to Take the GMAT, where, sorry, I just was checking the comments here. Get Excited to Take the GMAT. It's people did much, much better when they had changed their mindset to, instead of like viewing the anxiety as a negative, viewing it as a positive. Like, oh, okay, my heart rate's actually getting me amped up to, you know, this anxiety is really just me being excited to perform at my best. Yeah. So that's a big thing. Sorry, I think I missed some of the questions earlier, so I want to go back and check here what we got. So yeah, just to clarify, I mentioned it at the start. It was actually a 770, so the title's wrong. So sorry there, sorry there, Zoya. We will be changing the title. So great job, Zoya. Yep, and it was three months. There's a question about the better option to take.
My initial score was a 600, not a 360.
Yeah, that's the other part, right? Yeah.
So not as drastic of a jump, unfortunately.
But still very impressive. Yeah, those are the hardest points. The last, you know, I think I spent several years getting my final 770 to 780. So that 770, very, you know, it gets, you have less room for error at the top. So great job. There's a question about, we did talk about this one earlier, you know, having to work a lot of hours. So just finding what can work for you. Often mornings are good. You know, you may have to spread out your calendar more. But I think we kind of covered that. There was that tip earlier that in terms of trying to, when I said squeeze in, it's kind of like if you're waiting in line, flashcards was kind of what I was getting at. That can help a lot. Just like building fluency and thinking about that in terms of, I want to build fluency. And I think Zoya's been, you know, really hitting on that as well. When you have that content mastery, then a lot of the other stuff isn't important, like algorithms and everything else, right? Question on the, and sorry about the chat. I accidentally had it on the wrong chat window, so my fault. Better option to take, Focus Edition or Standard Edition. So yeah, so it depends on which round. Basically, the January 31st, the old one goes away. So if you're going round 2, you could go for either of them, except for Harvard and Wharton are not taking for round 2 this year, the Focus Edition. So the main differences is with Focus Edition, you don't have sentence correction, you don't have geometry, and the data sufficiency is less, about half the data sufficiency, called pure math, like where it's more equation based, is not included. You can read up more on that on the blog, but depending on what your strengths are and your timeline is how to decide on that. There's a question here for Zoya. What do you have an idea of what you're planning to apply to or do with the now that you have your awesome score?
Yeah, I want to apply for a dual degree for an MBA and an MPP. And so there's still a couple programs that I'm looking at, but I'm actually looking to apply next year.
Oh, next year. Very good. So that'll give you time for your application. That's cool. Yeah. So giving yourself some time, like she said, you know, having a goal will can create more intensity to get done with this, because you really don't want to drag it out necessarily, in a sense of it's okay if it actually takes longer, but you don't want it to be like stops and starts. It's kind of, you know, like so much like going through these mental valleys. Oh, I give up. And then, you know, right. And then come back a year later, you study 3 months and then 3 months off. It's like better to just be, you know, push through and get it done. And then have the time to do your application, you know, in the time frame that makes sense. Let's see. There was a question. Any last minute tips? We touched on that a little bit, but maybe a little more detail. Was there the day of and maybe the day before? in terms of how did you have like a morning routine? And what time of day did you go with? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So I morning of my GMAT, I have like a, I don't know, fairly standard morning routine. Like I'd wake up, uh, I spend the first hour like just reading a book, not using my phone, like drinking some hot water. I don't know, very basic. And then I would normally like go for a walk or do some sort of exercise, go to the gym, whatever it was. On the day of the GMAT, I just went for a walk because I didn't want to do any like strenuous exercise, but I also thought like the fresh air and I don't know, a walk always wakes me up in the morning. So I did end up doing that, which is funny because the day before my GMAT, my grandma was like, "You're not gonna go for a walk tomorrow, right?" I was like, "No, I'm gonna go." And she was like, "You'll be tired for your test." And I was like, "No, I'm going so that I'm not tired." And so I think also just like not doing anything entirely new, right? If you haven't been working out, like this is not the day to hit the gym. But just like keeping consistent. Again, if you haven't been having coffee, like don't chug like a Red Bull right before your GMAT. And so I think just kind of maintaining consistency with whatever routine you've had. So if you have 2 days left, like maybe just try and keep things as they have been. That being said, like I think the night before, obviously, like try having a healthy meal. So there's, I know like some food, like brain foods, people say like think salmon and broccoli and all these things. So like have a healthy meal. Uh, just like make sure you get enough sleep. I think try to go to bed a little earlier than you normally would because it might take you a little longer to fall asleep. And yeah, morning of, just don't try anything funky. I took my test, I think around 12 p.m. And so I let myself sleep in. I, went for a walk, had breakfast, gave myself, I think, like an hour in between, just in case anything went wrong. So I could test my internet. I could like log in a little early. I could take like 30 minutes to just relax and not like eat and come straight away. And so yeah, I don't know. I guess like no major life-changing tips, but if you're 2 days before, I'm sure you have the material down and now you just have to kind of have faith in yourself.
That's right. That's right. Those are all great tips. I like the time that you chose. 12 is good. I did this research. I think is kind of interesting that on average the activation level peaks at like of the brain getting into like the ideal state like 3 to 4 hours after waking, and it was most glaringly bad like the very first hour or two. So that's an advantage of the online one. Is like a lot of the time slots are at like 8 a.m. Whereas if you wanted like 3, 4 hours, and that's like, if you're not used, depends when you wake up, but if you're not used to waking up at 4 or 5, so for me, I would often do that like, yeah, 10:30, 11, 12. So that's great. Yeah. Definitely that tip of sticking with your routine, not doing anything too much different. I'm glad you didn't exhaust yourself too bad from your walk. So that's good. And I think that's a great tip. And let's see. There was this question we talked some about preparing, how broke down between each attempt and what changed each time. And so I think you said you spread out the practice test each week, the final 5, 6 weeks, and then but maybe talk a little bit about breaking down in between tests and also between maybe the two actual tests, if something changed. If there was anything in particular that think you can attribute to I know you said the extra week of practice help, but if there was anything else, going from 720 to 770, there can just be natural fluctuation, but curious on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in between, I'll address those one at a time. So in between the practice exams, I would take it every Saturday, and then the rest of the Saturday, I would not do any TTP. So I think I would just give, and that was only for the last 5 weeks, but I would give myself, just because I feel you're so brain fried after doing a practice exam. So I'd give myself like a couple hours, and then after those few hours, I would go and start to review the practice exam. I usually didn't get through the entire thing that night. And so I would review maybe like half of quant or half of verbal or whatever it was. And then over the course of the next probably 3 days. I would then review the rest, just like an hour or two every day whenever I had time. And the reason it took me so long is because I would go through every question from the practice exams and read the solutions on GMAT Club. So even the questions that I got right, I would look up on GMAT Club. And I think that was really, really helpful for me because, especially for the verbal section, although verbal was my stronger section throughout, I think having that, looking at the like the official questions and the solutions on GMAT Club was really helpful because you may have gotten the right answer, but you may not, during the time you're actually doing the practice exam, have thought of why the other four are wrong necessarily and really got deep into it. And so when you have that time when you're able to step back and you're able to review the solutions that multiple, people on GMAT Club are writing, that's really, really helpful. Same thing actually with TTP is that in the initial stages, it tells you to do the test untimed or allowing yourself extra time. And I really didn't want to take that advice because I thought I one of the things I really struggled with was time management, and I thought that would just like set me up for failure and make me take 5 minutes for every question. But I did end up taking a lot more time initially and just like giving myself that, and I think it really helped, especially for verbal, because when I was going through each question for sentence correction, for every single option, I would write down like why it was wrong, not just pick the right answer. And so that helps you kind of be more thorough when you're studying. And then of course, in my final prep, I did everything timed. In between attempts, honestly, there's not much that I changed. The reason I took the GMAT for the second time in such a short window was because I felt that by the first time I had a better grip of the concepts than was shown through my score. And so when I was taking my practice exams, I think I got a 730 on one, but the rest I got 740 to 760. And so I knew that I was able to kind of perform better than I had. And I was so close to my target score. So it seemed worth it. And that's actually why I didn't wait a really long time. That being said, I think if your initial score you think is reflective of your abilities, and it's not what you want, then I would say it's wise to take some time to actually make some changes instead of just signing up for it right away, because then you're not likely to get a very different score, especially if you haven't seen that on practice exams, because they are a pretty solid reflection of what the real test will be like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Totally good advice to base your when you take the actual test based on the practice test scores. So generally there, you know, you do want to have the flexibility to, if you're not like there is a little bit of a harsh reality here. We need to take the test when we're ready, not necessarily when we want to. So, we ideally you're hitting that, those practice test scores, right? We want to be hitting those practice test scores. But then you do, with the online test, at least you can schedule it within like as long as it's 2 days before, pretty much the slots are open. So so you do want to set that goal, but then you don't really want to force it when your practice test scores are not at that level. Do focus on the things you need to improve, like Zoya says, and then retake it. And then but then again, yeah, I think her approach was great, that it may take more than one attempt. If your practice test scores are in that range you want, it may still take, you still might fluctuate a little up and down. So giving yourself multiple attempts at it, once you are in the range, you're going to have a really high probability of getting what you want. Yeah. Especially if you're doing the things we talk about with the mindset, the wellness, all that. Very good. So there's a question here. How did you proceed with the questions you couldn't solve on your own, you got stuck and struggled with?
So when I was doing TTP, there's solutions to everything, and there's video solutions to a lot of the questions as well. So honestly, there wasn't much that I didn't that like TTP solutions wouldn't help me figure out if I was really stuck. But there were quite a few things, especially in the beginning. I think I may have over leveraged TTP's chat feature, but there is the ability to ask questions through the chat. And so, if I was like really stuck with something or struggling with a concept, I would ask, and their team is really helpful with kind of responding to that stuff and helping you kind of talk through it if you need to. And then with the practice exams, I just use GMAT Club to go through solutions. And then the custom tests were really helpful for for topics that I found difficult. And so that's not necessarily things I was stuck at, but just topics that I struggle with in general. So since school, I've found like probability and geometry really difficult. And I see another question on the chat that says, is it okay if I leave some chapters in quant that I find difficult? I personally would not recommend that. I spent more time on the topics that I found difficult because if you find them easy, you'll probably get the questions right anyway. So if anything, like the ones that you find hard are probably the ones you want to dedicate a little more time to, even though it is going to be more difficult and frustrating and time consuming, but that'll be the thing that really makes or breaks your, I don't know, like 30 to 50 point increase at the end. So
Right.
yeah, for things that I found hard, GDP's chat feature, GMAT Club, and then yeah, doing things that really honing in on the chapters that you find difficult.
That's right. And that is good advice. You don't want to just completely skip chapters. I will add a couple notes on that. So there is a feature in the course that you can, it kind of does depend a bit on your score goal in terms of like doing literally everything. So, but the course will adapt if you have a lower score goal and take away some of the chapters. So then some of the most advanced things are like really the highest hanging fruit. So there is a little bit of like, it's right. The lower and mid hanging fruit are more important than the highest hanging fruit in terms of the algorithm, the very, very hardest stuff. So if you really are going for that top score, really covering everything is your best bet. And if you're, have a little bit more wiggle room there on the score, then you can have more flexibility with that. Yeah. So let's see.
Ben.
Yeah.
I think like geometry has been a lifelong fear of mine. Literally since second grade, I have hated geometry. So TTP helped me like overcome that hurdle. But at the same time, to be honest, I think I may have gotten one or two geometry questions on the actual GMAT. And I spend a lot of time like drawing really nice shapes in my notes and things like that. So yes, it may not necessarily pay off. And it really does depend on how much time that you have. So that's a great point.
Yeah, for sure. And also just getting into the mindset, like you said, though, of like, right, just because it's difficult doesn't mean, to try and looking at that as an opportunity for improvement. I like that. I use that phrase a lot, opportunities for improvement, just as a reframe kind of on weaknesses. So, and having that mindset about it, like, I think in one of your things I read, you said you like kind of were able to really change your mindset a lot on the geometry in terms of like learning to like have more fun with it. Is that right? I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I actually have like when I started not liking geometry is when you learn what straight angles and acute angles are. And so I really was nervous about that. That's probably was the most anxiety inducing thing for me on the GMAT. And unfortunately for me, it was towards the end of the TTP course. And so that was something I was like dreading all along. But it really was helpful. I think one thing I did is with that chapter, I like reviewed everything in depth. And so TTP is really comprehensive. So of course, especially with like the initial few like parts of a chapter, sometimes you can skip over them, but if you have a good kind of grasp of that topic. But for geometry, I covered everything and I actually kind of like it now. So it was a complete 180 for me.
That's really cool. Yeah. And that's pretty common, I think. And that's really awesome that your mindset and came to enjoy it. And I think it's pretty common in general, right? That things at first, they feel really hard. It's more frustrating, but getting into that mindset, like I have it on my fridge here. I got all these mantras, like I embrace discomfort. I love to do the hard thing. I just do the harder thing. Right. And, listening to podcasts on that and you like, one funny one I always come back to is like David Goggins. Like I heard him do like 4,300 pull-ups in 24 hours and his hands are falling off. And I got so much inspiration. I'm like, I could do 100, like, maybe I can't do, maybe I'm not going to run 300 miles, but, I can like step up my game a little. So get your inspiration from wherever you can. But then if you just kind of, the more you make it a habit, another term for it's like exposure therapy of like doing the thing you don't want to do. And then you get more in the habit of like, I love to do hard things. And you notice it carrying over from one thing to another in life. And one of the cool things here too with the GMAT that's like the most rewarding as a teacher is like, if people say that this like really carried over into other parts of my life, the lessons I learned, like both technical things of like, reading or critical thinking and these things, but then also like the lessons of like time management, psychology, mindfulness, applying that to other areas of their life. Do you feel like in some ways like this journey, like, as challenging as it, a lot of time and work and heart sweat into it, but is that something that you, I guess maybe speak on terms of your why and purpose behind it, and maybe some things that might carry over into the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I am someone who can be really disciplined. Um, and so when I like really set my mind to something, even when if like I said, like I skipped several social engagements because I was like, I need to do this. Sometimes my parents would like want to talk to me. I'd be like, no, I have to study. So I was like a little crazy about it. But I think like at the end of the day, it's like as if you're setting your mind to something, like don't negotiate with yourself. Again, this was on some like sports video I watched, and it was like when you're running, you initially decide, okay, I'm going to run for 30 minutes, but then 10 minutes in, you're like, just run for 20 minutes. But not doing that with yourself, like not negotiating with yourself and kind of following through with the goals that you've set, is the mindset that I try to apply to, I mean, not just the gym, but also to TTP and also to like anything else. And so, like one thing in terms of exposure therapy, I don't like the cold, so I would take a cold shower every morning
That's
when I
great.
was
I'm in
studying
the cold
for the
shower
GMAT.
club too, so I recommend for everyone. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, it's just doing things that are hard, but also challenging yourself in other aspects of your life. I think that's really true, kind of rides over because I don't know, let's say you've done 2 hard things already, then by the time you get to studying, you can kind of tackle another one. And so, I think that's also why it's important to have balance and to give yourself, the time to do other things that are important to you as well.
Totally. I love it. I love it. So good. The cold showers and all those other things. Yeah, translating it over, if I said about athletics, right? Translating that over, maybe you're someone that likes the gym or something, or and you translate that to the GMAT, or you hate the gym and you learn to love the GMAT and translate that to the gym or whatever. But I think the translating it over is really powerful. And in terms of the why, I don't know that we dove that much into it. Did you have like a really strong, bigger picture? So there's like getting the score. It sounds like you're really driven to get the score. Maybe talk a little bit about like the bigger picture and what you want to do, with the MBA, and how maybe also connecting that to how that, helped you be so motivated.
Yeah. So I have certain like institutes that I want to apply to, but I know I want to go to one of the top like 7 to 10 programs, and so that's actually why my initial target score was a 730 because I thought, what score do I need to make myself a really competitive applicant for those schools? And that's what I was aiming for. As I got through more and more of my prep, it that score kind of increased naturally for me as I was doing the practice exams and things like that. But that was my why. I think as it is for many of us, right? Like, of course, there are messages and you can apply this to other aspects of your life, but at the end of the day, it is an admissions test, and so it's helpful to have that end goal in your mind. You are studying towards getting into the top program that will then open up like a lot of doors for you as well, and just the programs themselves, right? I think if I'm going to spend 2 to 3 years of my life doing studying and leaving the workforce and spending a large chunk of change on a program, I want to do it for something that like really teaches me uh, challenges me and is the best quality education that I can get. And so that was kind of my why throughout. And then again, because I also want to apply for a dual degree, it makes it a little more challenging in terms of admissions as well, because then you have to get into 2 programs. And so that was kind of all the why that I needed. And I think I'm sure it's the same for like many of you that are watching this, is that, you know, you want to get into the top programs, and this is, it's not the ticket to them necessarily, but it's one hurdle that I think we have a lot more control of as applicants. You can, your GPA is probably already kind of calculated. You, for most of us, you can't necessarily control like how the admissions committee will see you, but this is one like very tangible number that you have a lot more control of. And so knowing that and giving myself ownership of that also really helps, or helped me.
Right, right. I love that. And thinking about it as a thing you can control when so many other things are out of your control is totally a great mindset about it. Because a lot of times people just kind of have the stereotype that, you know, oh, I hate standardized tests, or test is the stupid hoop I have to run through. But, you know, connecting to that why, and also looking at it as that opportunity that this is under your control. You totally, whatever starting score you're at, you totally can burst through the barriers. There's also this common myth that there's a plateau. Only really, I mean, is if you believe it. Like, I mean, you may, it's possible that you hit temporary plateaus, you know, as you go, and you need to put a little bit more time in, or there may be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but there really is no such thing that you can't get better at a skill. And so if you keep that in mind, you know, you'll keep pushing that score up and up and up. So I love that. So there were a couple of little questions here at the end. There was number of mocks. Yeah, I think we talked about that. Taking all the official ones is generally a good idea, and the course encourages that. And I think that's what you did. So that's great. And then there were the 2 questions about what level you had and completing it fully. Am I correct that you, for the most part, I think you had it on the highest level, the 740 plus, and
Yep.
completed it fully, aside from like maybe a few things you kind of skimmed that you already knew? Is that, do I have that right?
I pretty much completed it.
Pretty much
I didn't
completed
skim
everything.
much.
Pretty much everything. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
But I think skimming is a good option for those that are, you know, on a tighter timeline.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. Well, I think did I hear correctly? Like there were a few like very early lessons that you were just able to, maybe you were able to complete them more quickly. Is that what it was? Was the detail that you were
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, cool. So there was another question. Willie says, oh, I think we covered that. How did we proceed with
We
the
did
questions you
answer.
couldn't solve on your own and got stuck on and struggled with? Yeah, I think we did catch that maybe 10 minutes ago or so. So, let's see. Any last questions? Cool. Well, any last thoughts or things you want to share, Zoya?
I think just, I don't know, I guess give it your best shot. I think honestly, everyone here is capable of just getting whatever score they want. Frankly, it's just how much practice you're going to do and how much work you're going to put into it. But as long as you set your mind to it and you decide like you want a certain score, you're going to be able to achieve it. And I am not an ambassador, but I do think I could be, because I really like TTP, and I think it honestly is a good thing to give a shot if you're trying to study for your GMAT. It's a really good option, and it lays out everything for you. And I keep telling my friends now that are taking the GMAT to do it. So try the course.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we have a link there. There is the $1 trial, so go for it. Give it a try. Thanks so much, Zoya. I really appreciate it. I think that's very inspiring. I think everyone learned a lot here, and congratulations on your amazing score. We know you do big things going forward. Thanks everyone for coming, and please,
Thanks,
yeah,
Ben.
put in
Great
the
chatting with
comments
you.
your
Thanks,
top
Ben.
takeaways. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thanks.